Hello, hello, hello. We are here live doing a stream. I cannot believe it. This is it. Like, we are here in the big time. So, I want to thank you all for joining me here on Leaf Academy on YouTube. So, what we are trying to do is build a community. This is what we're trying to do, build a community for you. If you work in a school, if you are a teacher, if you're a principal, if you're a student, if you're a parent, if you are involved at any way in the educational system and you are just completely frustrated with what is going on, guess what? I am here for you. I am your advocate. Yes, we are going to change the educational system. We're going to basically we're going to change it. That's it. Like there's nothing else that we can do. We have to fix the system. So in this video, we're going to go over just the five 21st century skills that your kids need to learn in school. If you're a teacher, these are the skills. So I'm going to try to explain them in different ways so that each group understands what to do with them. So why don't we get started? So, thank you so much for joining. My name is D. Scott Schwartz. I am your host. Just in case you don't know who I am, again, we have about 30 followers. So, you don't know who I am yet. My name is D. Scott Schwartz. I am a certified educator, and I have 20 years of experience in the education industry, inside schools, I guess. That's probably the best way. Education insider. I started my career as a teaching assistant and worked my way all the way up the education ladder to my last post as superintendent. And so that is basically as I come to you to explain all about education. So what we're going to talk about today is 21st century skills. And so let me throw them up there so you could see them. You've got 5 things: leadership, team building, problem solving, sales, and communication. Okay, so those are the 5 skills. We will come back to those. Don't worry about it. We will come back to them. So what we want to do is we want to basically talk about these 5 skills and what they mean. And so for teachers, these 5 skills are your buckets. They're your buckets for curriculum. Hopefully that makes sense. So instead of teaching the standards, because you can't, I'm going to say this, if you haven't done the research, if you don't know about Dr. Heidi Hayes Jacobs, please go look her up. But she has basically, tried to give us a roadmap. She even talks about curriculum maps as being a roadmap, but she has tried to explain that standards are demonstrations. They are not goals. You can't teach a demonstration. You can show a demonstration. So you have to teach something so that the kids can then demonstrate the standards. So the buckets are those 3 things. That way. Sorry. Right here. These 5 things right here that's the bucket. So you're teaching leadership, you're teaching team building, problem solving, sales, communication. That's what you're teaching. So let's look at let's go back and let's look at what we're talking about here. So let's transition it over. All right. So on the one side is the bucket of 21st century skills in the curriculum, okay? And on the other side, you see what we now teach, okay? So you see English, math, science, social studies, and gym. And I included gym specifically because it's actually in federal law that Every child must have PE. They must have it. It's a requirement. So because of that, I think it needs to be put in. There's no other subject other than PE that actually has like a minute requirement, which is interesting because, again, this started when President Kennedy was in office back in the 60s, and he said that, young children need to be healthy, and the only way to do that is through physical exercise. So every kid has to take gym, but why don't we take an example out of the first one, English, okay? So every high school kid in America has to learn Shakespeare, right? We all know this. If you're an English teacher right now, if you know an English teacher, if you're going to take English in high school, get your teacher on this YouTube channel because this is for them. So we teach Shakespeare, and guess what? Everybody moans and groans. Why? Because Shakespeare is about as dry as day-old bread. It is what it is. We are not interested in reading Shakespeare for Shakespeare's sake. But what if we put Shakespeare into a bucket, and the 21st century skill, you see it at the bottom, number 5, and so we'll go back to those skills so you can actually see it. So number 5, what if we taught Shakespeare in communication? Like what if we put Shakespeare into a communication bucket, right? I mean, does that make more sense? Do we put Shakespeare in a communication bucket? So what are we teaching? We're teaching, what did Shakespeare do so well? He was the world's greatest, most well-known influencer on communication. Why? Because he can tell a story. He can tell a story. So what do you need to be able to do in the 21st century? You need to be able to tell your story. If you're going for a job interview, you have to tell your story. They even ask this, that's the first question most interviewers ask is, tell me about yourself. So what do you say? You have to have a story. You have to kind of give context for who you are. If I was interviewing for a job and they said, well, tell me about yourself, I would say, well, I have 20 years of experience in education. I'm an education expert and I'm an insider. I understand everything about the K-12 system. I know where all the problems are. I know where all the failings are. I know where all the leaks out of the pipes are. Like, I know everything that's going on. I know all the players. I know everything. And so if you hire me, you're going to get a true expert in the educational field. Probably somebody you might want to hire if you're talking to someone who's saying, well, I'm an expert. Now, they're going to follow up with a question and say, okay, you think you're an expert. Now let us decide whether or not we agree. So here you go. Let's see. Let's see what you really know. And then they might ask me a follow-up question, at which point, if I am an expert, I can answer that question. And then their next follow-up question, again, I can answer the question. So I'm proving my story. So when you go for an interview, let's say whatever job it is, and it doesn't matter, entry level all the way up through executive, what is your story? Because then all your follow-up answers need to prove the story accurate. 1, that builds trust. 2, it builds honesty and sincerity. So now that person thinking like, I might be your boss, well, I trust you a lot more because you told me a story and then you backed it up. So what can we learn from Shakespeare in storytelling? Well, 1 is, who's the main character? Now, in your story, you're the main character. But who are the supporting cast members? So I have people along the way, and if you think about it, think about a play. Think about a movie. What is your favorite movie? Think about it. Who's the main character? Who's the supporting cast? And so when you start to dive in deeper into your story, who is your supporting cast? So my supporting cast is my parents. So my mom and my dad. My mom was, if you know the movie Mr. Holland's Opus, my mom was that level teacher. She was a 30-year special ed teacher. So she was that level teacher in her district. Like when she retired, the whole district came back to celebrate her. She didn't know that was going to happen. It was unusual. It doesn't always happen, and obviously we were invited to the ceremonies, and we were shocked as the family of like, wow, like you made a real impact. Um, Her students went on to go to college, went on to be highly successful. When they started working with her, again, she was an elementary special ed teacher, a lot of her students could not read. And they're in elementary school, just couldn't read. We're not talking kindergarten, we're talking first, second, third, fourth, fifth grade, where they're still struggling in reading. And we all know how important reading is. So these are the 21st century skills. Now, why? I'm gonna throw them back up. So this is the reason why they're so important. So I wrote an article on Medium. Maybe I'll get the links in to the YouTube description. Might be important to do that. So I'll put the links in for the Medium link so you can go read articles that I've written. And one of them happens to be how valuable is your high school diploma? Now, if you look at the column with liberal arts, all right? Now, for those of you, I actually have had somebody tell me, like, be careful, you're not talking about the liberals in liberal arts. It's not a political thing. It's an educational terminology. Liberal arts means basically well-rounded in subject content. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be well-rounded. See, that I need to be very clear. Liberal arts, unfortunately, got synonymous with well-rounded. The problem is that liberal arts is just content. That's it. So there's only two things that you can teach. You can teach content or you can teach skills. In the 19th and 20th century, when our educational system was developed, teaching content was the most important thing. The reason being is because basically, if you had an education, it was all about, what you knew. Like if you didn't have an education, you didn't know anything and you had no access to information. There was basically libraries. And they were very limited, and pretty much they were off limits to only the wealthy. So you had no access to information. You had no access to content. You had no access to answers. What's the one thing that's changed about the 21st century? Well, guess what? You, right there, out in cyberspace, YouTube, internet, social media. You have access to more information than you even know what to do with. And so what's the purpose of teaching facts, dates? Like there is no purpose anymore. Like it's important to have a context of like what are we talking about? Let's look at the social studies one. All right. So, we go down. So we're gonna go down. I gotta do it this way. So we're gonna go down to English, math, science, social studies. Okay. So right there, social studies. What we're going to talk about is let's talk about the American Revolution. Why did we go and fight the kingdom, the British Empire? Why did we do that? Like, why would the American colonists who had no money, no forces, and most of the people living in the colonies did not want to go to war? Like, why would we start a fight with the greatest empire on the planet at that time? And so that's something to understand. Now, do you need to know all the names and all the dates? It's good to know kind of time frame. So it's good to know that's happened in the 1700s. It's good to know that the Declaration of Independence was obviously July 4th, 1776. That's a good date to know. But beyond that, do you need to know the dates of the battles? No, because if you can remember the names of the battles or the cities in which they were fought, you can look up everything else. That's the point, is that you can look up everything else. Hopefully that's making sense. So what can we do with social studies then? So let's throw it back up. Let's go back over to 21st century curriculum. What's the bucket that we can teach? And there's a lot that you can do with social studies. I like to use leadership and team building and problem solving. Like, you can even throw in communications, because you could talk about Thomas Paine and his pamphlet called Common Sense. But like, you're really talking about how you build a nation. Leadership, team building, problem solving. They had a problem. So what was their solution? So one of the bigger problems that they had was that the empire, the British Empire, and the king kept putting taxes on the colonies. And they didn't have any way to stop it. Like, there was it. Like, if the king wanted a tax, he made a tax. And the colonies, as they said, no taxation without representation. They wanted a way to basically have, like, they wanted a voice in government and to say, like, wait a minute, why are you putting this tax on us? Do you understand what it's going to do? We sort of have this same problem with our own government. You know, American citizens, like, our government does a lot of stuff in Washington, D.C., and American citizen does not have any actual representation. We are at the same point in history. The average citizen is being taxed without representation. Why is that? Because our elected officials don't go to Washington and then represent us. They go to Washington and then represent themselves. And that is a fundamental difference from what the founding fathers wanted as our government. They wanted the people who went to serve in government to be responsible for the people that elected them. That's a whole different level of leadership. That's a whole different level of team building. They're the leader of the team. The team is us. And so the president is supposed to represent 331 million people. Now, again, remember, when the United States was first started, you know, we declared independence on July 4th, 1776. But we didn't become a nation until like 1780, you know, 3 or so. Like, it took a while. We had to win a war, and then we had to ratify, you know, the Constitution. That did not happen overnight. So that took a while. And there were not that many people in the United States. I don't know the exact number of citizens. I didn't look at the census data, but you could go back and look. See, that's the thing. Like, I don't remember how many people were in the United States in 1776 or when the Constitution was ratified, but you could look it up. Like, that's the whole point. Like, you don't need to remember everything. You just don't need to remember everything. So, I don't know how much that was helpful. Hopefully it was. I'm going to be doing this a lot. So, I hope that you love this. I'm going to keep getting my live stream. This is basically, I'm doing a live stream. I'm going to keep improving this live stream. I'm going to get way more transitions. I'm going to get camera angles. I'm going to do a whole lot of stuff. Hopefully you like the intro video. Again, we're putting this all together. This is all about community. Community. We need every teacher in America signed up for this account, not because of subscribers. This is about ideas. This is about changing the system. So maybe I'll leave with that. What is changing the system? What does that actually mean? Well, part of the issue, so let me lay out the problem first. The problem is that we don't provide any support to teachers. None. Education Week released its 2021 teacher survey data, and it points out lack of support as one of the most problematic issues in the K-12 system. Now, what does support really mean? It means the teachers are always on their own. If you want to really burn out a teacher, just let them figure everything out by themselves. That's it. So here you go. Here's 25 kids. We're not going to help you. You figure each one of them out. We're not going to give you any help whatsoever. We're not going to give you research. We're not going to give you data. You do it all. Then they got to write lesson plans every single week, which is it's like 44 weeks of school. So every single week you got to write your own lesson plan. We're not going to help you. Just you got to do it by yourself. That means you got to do all the research. You got to do all the planning. You got to figure all that out. Now, we're not going to give you any materials either. You got to get those by yourself. How many things do we need to put on the teacher's shoulders? They already have enough to do, which is teach, which we also don't fully prepare them to do, which is why I'm writing a book called The Practice of Teaching. And there's 4 practice areas. We'll get into that in another live stream. Trust me, there's so much that I have to put out for you guys. So if you want to burn out a teacher, that's the way to do it. So I just wrote an article on Medium, which I also linked to LinkedIn. If you want to find me there, my name is D. Scott Schwartz. If you're not in my network, please try to see if there's someone you can get to introduce you to me, because I would love to connect with you. But I wrote an article called The 45-Hour Teacher Work Week. Yes, 45 hours. I know some of you teachers are like, what? 45 hours? I would love to work 45 hours a week. Well, you can, because all of my staff did. When we started doing the teacher development program, every one of my staff, we reduced their workload down to 45 hours a week. And in fact, most weeks, they didn't even work 45. It was 40. But that's the max. You really shouldn't be working more than 45 hours a week, because you have to have life-work balance. You have to have the time to recharge. Teaching is a hard job. It is not an easy job. Anybody that says teaching is easy has never been inside a classroom and never had to actually deliver content. It doesn't work, because being able to manage all of those kids in the class and making sure that they're making progress. See, there's a difference between lecturing and actually teaching. And so hopefully parents that are watching this and students watching this understand that your teacher puts in a lot of time and effort. Now, if you feel you have a struggling teacher, like if you're a student and your teacher is struggling, have them follow this account, because this is where they're going to get more help. They need help in their actual teaching skills. So that's why I'm writing the book. That's why I have a teacher development program running right now for novice teachers. Novice teachers means anybody that doesn't have any experience or feels like they need to learn more. I'm going to throw it up there right now for you. So you can go right now to the Novice Teacher Development Program. It is at leafacademy.org/TD program. I have a very special offer for the first 1,000 novice teachers. Again, novice doesn't mean first year or second year. Novice just means that you are not confident in your skills. So if you feel like you have a lot to learn, if you feel like that your lesson planning is not completely on point, that when you go into the class that a lot of mistakes happen and there's no teacher flow, like kids are interrupting you all the time, please join the program. The third thing is all about making connections. So if you're teaching Shakespeare and the kids are zoning out, that's a problem. You're not making a connection between the curriculum and the student. So that's another teacher's skill. If you feel like you need help with that, again, join the novice program. And then the last is classroom environment, which again, there's two aspects to the classroom environment. There's a physical environment, and then there's a social emotional part. You need a conducive classroom. You need a conducive classroom to learning. And that doesn't happen unless you get at the student's belief system about who they are. I don't know if you know this, but within the first week of school, your students are determining what grade they're going to earn. Yeah, it has nothing to do with you. Well, it does, because they're watching what you're doing. Kids are watching you as a teacher and saying, what can I get out of this class? So your A kids know within the first week, all right, I'm going to get an A. They know exactly what they need to do. They have basically replicated this. If they got A's in kindergarten, they got A's in first grade, they're in second grade now, they're watching you going, okay, what does this teacher want? Okay, so they only expect this, 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 I got it, this, this, this. This is, I'm just going to give you what you want. Now, I don't know if that's what you want to be teaching. I don't know if you want to be teaching automatons, basically kids who just do what you tell them to do, or if you want to teach actual learning and progress, you want your kids to excel. See, that's a different type of a classroom. If you just want control, that's a different type of student. If you do that, if you set your classroom up as a control environment, I guarantee you some kids are going to fail. They have to. Some kids just cannot follow your instructions. Doesn't make them bad kids. It just means that they just cannot follow your instructions. Don't worry, they can't follow their parents' instructions either. And if you're a parent and your child is like that out-of-the-box kid, again, follow this account, get their teacher on this account, and I will walk them through how they can help your child. I have 20 years of experience with the most out-of-the-box students that you've ever seen. And that was every one of my kids. So let me give you the demographic, and then I'm going to leave you guys for today. So the students that came to my program, so first of all, I ran a school under the Department of Education in my state. And so my students were public and charter school students. So they were, kids that every teacher that would be watching this, that's your kid. That's your kid in your classroom. But they were the one kid that tested your patience. They were the one student who just was not succeeding on any assignment that you gave. In fact, in most cases, they started to refuse to do assignments, either in class or homework, or they just would bomb a test on purpose. Like they seemed to be, I want to make that very clear, out to get you. I know you're a teacher. If you have at least 2 or 3 years of experience, you know one kid who seemed to purposely try to make you push your buttons. Like that's basically it. They just wanted to push, poke, 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 poke. Stop, just sit, stop. Now, again, I know, it happens. So, one of the things that we want to talk about is, how do you get kids to rein it in? And the only way to do that is with the 5 21st century curriculum buckets. So my students were public and charter school kids. They had failed in your class. Now, where do they go? Because some of you know those kids leave your room. Where do they go? Well, in my state, they came to me. So all of my students were the kids that were tossed out of public and charter schools, every single one. And my job with my staff was to figure out what do they need, how do we meet those needs, how do we help them, and how do we get them an education. In many cases, most of my students were below grade level in both literacy and math. They were below grade level. So we had a lot of work to do. We had to try to not just get them back on a year-to-year basis, but we also had to try in some respects to boost their scores. So one student in particular came to me in the fourth grade, and he was reading on a kindergarten level. And so the public school gave me a whole bunch of reports that said that they felt he could reach a second or third grade reading level by the time he graduated. Well, that wasn't good enough for me. That's functionally illiterate in the United States. Fourth grade is the minimum level that a student needs to reach in order to be literate in the United States. So eighth grade is the max. I don't know if you know that. So it's fourth to eighth grade. That's the range. So if you're above eighth grade, that's great. It's gravy. It's bonus. You don't need to be above the eighth grade to be a master reader in the United States. Most books, magazines, newspapers, the New York Times is written on an eighth grade reading level. That is it. Eighth grade. So, you go beyond eighth grade, that's well and good, but only academics, only, university professors care that you are on an above eighth grade level. So most of our students don't go to college. Most of our students are going to be working in just regular society, so they don't need to read beyond an eighth grade level. So we're wasting a lot of time in high school on reading. When you assign novels and when you do your English classes, that's all you're doing is teaching reading to kids who already know how to read. So they're looking at this like, more? Why? Why do we need to do more reading? I know how to read. And they're right. And that's where the 21st century has really brought to highlight that we cannot continue to just teach basic skills. We need to start teaching 21st century skills, go beyond the basic, and 21st century skills, just so we really, I'm going to put them back up, just so you have them again. Again, 21st century skills are leadership, team building, problem solving, sales, and communication. That's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about. So I want to thank you again. I promise my next live stream will be a little bit more cohesive, but I wanted to try to get people out with some content. If you are a teacher, you're a parent, you're a student, follow this account because we're going to start demystifying the mystify. So the mystery of the educational system. If you have any questions, put it in the comments. I'm just gonna write them all down, and because I'm doing this live, like I can actually really respond to your comments because I'm just gonna keep putting stuff out. So the more questions you ask, the more targeted my next streams will be. Like I have no schedule. Basically, I am going to do this for 8 hours a day, every day for the next 30 days. Like I am going to pretty much lay out the entire educational system. So hopefully you like this and make a comment. I want to thank you so much for joining me. My name is D. Scott Schwartz, signing.